All right, guys, I'm gonna show you how to frame this roof. This is when you're coming from one direction into another direction. Some people call it a lay-on, some people call it a doghouse, different terms, but it's kind of a complicated part of construction, but it's really not that hard. First, you need to know your pitch. If you don't know, you can take a level and measure. You can take your speed square and figure it out. There's videos online how to do that. Figure out your pitches, but if it's new construction, it should be on your truss paperwork. So here we're going from a 612 into an 812. First step, we need to find the point that we're going to start with. So you can either put a string line and go on the top of your trusses if they're close, or take a board like this, take a level, set it on top, and make sure it's perfectly level. You're gonna make a mark on the roof you're going into. I've already done that. I used a different method. I put a nail a couple trusses back, ran it along here. These are all in line because I made sure when we set the trusses, I pulled the string line right to this exact point so I know square and I know my level. If you don't know where square is, there's a couple different methods of finding that. You can take your framing square and do a string line. You can measure from the end of your roof to the center of your point and then measure over up here. This is the point that we leveled from, but this isn't actually the point that the framing is going to be because your sheathing is going to go up. You're gonna just take a scrap like this is the simplest way, and set it up on here so that it's even with these edges, and then make a mark. Now you're gonna measure from the top. You're gonna find what that is. I'm about 3/8 down from pencil mark to the top of the peak. I'm gonna set my board here. This is gonna be my ridge board. I just cut it a little bit long. Gonna set it on my mark, and then I have to measure 3/8 down where it hits this wood. This is where the ridge board's actually going to go. Step I didn't mention, you want to plumb this truss and make sure that this truss is plumb so that when you're pulling this measurement, you're starting off right. We're going to pull a tape from this point to the face of this truss, and that is going to be the length of our ridge beam from the square end to the angled cut, the long side. All right, so here's where the math starts and people get confused. It's really not confusing. That's why I'm making this video. So as long as you know your pitches, it's very simple. So we're butting into the end of this truss. So I cut this exactly 90. I'm gonna crown it. Make sure the crown's going up. Like to mark it so I remember. I know that I'm going into an 8/12. So this is your short side and this is your long side. So you're gonna go to 8 and you're gonna go to 12. I have my mark right here at 74 and an 8. My crown is going this way. That's why I marked it on this side. So we need to do a backwards long cut at an 8/12 pitch. We're gonna get it close to our mark, set this to 12, and then this needs to be set to 8. You kind of sight the board to make sure it's exact. This is now my angle. So I'm gonna cut this off. This is scrap, and then this is going to lay on the roof at my lower mark, because this was my first crosshair that's exactly level, but this is gonna be the top of my ridge. You guys will understand this in a second. You wanna keep your sawdust off of your roof when you're walking. I'm gonna set this to my mark here and right on my crosshair, and I'm perfect. So I'm gonna get this nailed into place. All right, so I got it nailed. Now I'm gonna put a number 8 nail at my first crosshair. I'm gonna take a chalk line, go from here down to where my sheathing is going to intersect the roof. All right, so now that we have the chalk lines, we're gonna completely ignore them because this is really just for the OSB. Take a scrap again. You're going to move it just like that until it is flush there, and then make a mark on top. So this is going to be another chalk line you make. Measure whatever that is. Usually it's 1 3/4. In this case, yes, it is 1 3/4. So we're gonna go from this point. We're gonna make another tick down there and go 1 3/4 over and chalk another line on each side. Now that we got both lines chalked, this inner line is going to be where you're going to put your bottom board. Some guys use a 1x12, some guys use a 2x12. In this case, I'm just gonna use 2 2x4s, save money, and it's just as strong. I'm gonna cut this angle. Doesn't have to be perfect, just get close. I'm gonna put a 2x4 going from down there up there, and then I know I'm gonna be using 2x6 rafters, so I should be able to stack it right next to the other one. All right, so the purpose of this board is really just to span the distance between these trusses, because there's a good chance we're gonna go every 2 feet. You can also go 16 if you want, but this is so small, it's not worth it. So I'm gonna go every 2 feet, and there's a good chance that where this rafter lands is not gonna be on a truss. So these boards are going to span that weight and just help tie everything together. So you're really gonna wanna make sure you hit every truss on these boards though. I go every foot, so put some in between, but I like to put 2 in every truss to really make it solid. I pulled from here, far side of this, made a mark, X forward, 4, 6, 8 is somewhere up in here, so we're gonna call that good. We have this to nail to, so it'll be just fine. We are 5 3/8. We're going to take this and transfer this down 5 3/8 so we know that we're square. Now that we have our marks, we got to think about it. This is the part that confuses people, is this bottom angle, because it's beveled and angled for your roof. So this one is simple. I know that this is a 6/12, so we're going to cut this at a 6/12. Down here, we're going into an 8/12 at a back 6/12. I'll explain that in a second. Your board is going to go right here. I didn't put an X because I know it's always X forward for me, but this is going to be the longest part of my board. So I'm going to measure on the same side up here. I'm going to put a nail here so I can hold it and pull all the way down to the longest part of my board. I like to write down my number, that way I don't forget it. I'm going to crown the board, find out which way is up. This is my top cut, and I know that this is a 6/12. Right here on most speed squares, it'll say pivot. So I'm just gonna pivot off there. We're doing common framing when we're at a 6/12. So I'm going to pivot until I line up perfectly with a 6/12 like that. I'm gonna mark this, and this is my angle for this top ridge. I'm gonna flip it over. Long point is to me. We're 98 7/8. So I'm going to pull that from my long side. On the same side as you're going to make the mark. I have my mark. I'm going to flip it over. I wouldn't recommend doing this just so you don't confuse yourself, but it's going to be impossible to cut down there. So I'm just going to remember which way I'm going. This roof is a 6/12, so this angle is a 6/12. So the same thing, 12 mark, and find 6, and then slide it till it hits your mark. This is where it gets confusing again for some people. We have our opposite angles cut, because you're dying into the roof this way and up into your ridge board this way at this roof's pitch, the roof coming into the main roof. So this is a 6/12. I marked this at a long 6/12. The confusing part is the angle. All you gotta do is look at this thing. Set it on that pivot like I talked about earlier. Pivot up to whatever pitch you're going into, which is an 8/12. So I'm going to move it to an 8/12 common, and then look at my degrees, and I look like I'm 34. Again, this isn't trim carpentry, so you can also Google how many degrees is an 8/12 pitch. So that is the angle that you need to bevel your saw to. This way, you're gonna go to 34 degrees. I would highly recommend, if you do not have a Milwaukee or a DeWalt cordless saw, use a corded saw. This is gonna require a ton of horsepower, because not only are you ripping the long way, but you're also beveled, and this is like the hardest cut for a skill saw. So you don't want to be struggling up here. Make sure you have a new blade. You got to visualize your board, which way it's going and which way you need that bevel to go. If you need to set it in place, you can. I know that I marked this side, so I'm going to use my saw and cut like this so that this is my long point. This is what you're left with. It looks kind of funky, but again, this is my 6/12 for my first pitch. This is my 34 degrees or my 8/12 for the roof that I'm coming into. We'll give it a test, set it in place. Bam, we're perfect. I'm gonna put nail up here, probably 3 in each side, couple in the end. I'm probably gonna put 5 or 6 in that. You don't really want this going anywhere. You can see we're perfect on our square mark. You want to keep these plumb as you're going. Put 3 in the back side, 2 here, and 1 toenail through the top. Down here, 1 through the top, couple through the side, and this isn't going anywhere. The only other thing is finding your next location. The easiest way to do it is to grab your framing square. You're going to take the short edge against the inside of your rafter you just set. You got to keep it plumb, and you're just going to slide it along here. And you will notice that it makes a line here. It's very faint, you guys probably can't see it, but you can see it if you're in person. Then what I do, this is 1.5 inches on my short side, so I just set it here, give it a trace, and now I know my X is forward because I pulled from this side, and now we're back on track, so I can measure from this long point. So you just repeat this on both sides, and that's all there is to it. Thanks guys for watching. If you guys enjoyed this, hit subscribe, give us a like, and we'll see you guys in the next video. All right, hammer